Hello everyone, welcome back for a bonus round of Questline. I'm Ish, this is Uber. We're going to get right down into it. We're feeling pretty motivated because we got down to 42 minutes on our podcast, which is about 42 minutes less than normal. And we're now going to do a bonus round. I think it's going to be brief because our topics are kind of flimsy, to be honest. So, flimsy topics number one. And this sort of most of these stuff that I'm talking about now comes up because I'm playing Final Fantasy XIV a lot, obsessively actually, and I like so much of the game, and it sort of like inspired me to come up with the idea, come up with the very, very, very general topic of the little things that make a game feel really great. And I think those obviously are actually huge when you first start playing the game. Obviously, over time, things don't matter as much because you just don't notice them as much, and that's when the mechanics become paramount. But at the start of a game, the little things actually make you love the game initially, I think. For instance, weather cycles, night cycles, obviously the stuff that's in there.
AOE looting.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. If you like AoE looting, yeah. But I actually in Final Fantasy, you don't even have to loot. It just goes into your inventory automatically.
Oh, well, that's nice too.
Yeah, and everything that drops pretty much is a crafting supply. So you have like 30 different skins that you have in your backpack and stuff.
So in Final Fantasy, does everyone get their own drops then?
As far as I know, yeah. Like,
So it's not like shared, like, and when you're in a group, you don't roll for stuff, right? Everyone gets their own stuff.
you roll for drops in dungeons, like boss drops,
Mm-hmm.
but out in the world you don't. If it's like skins and or whatever. Like in terms of if you're mining, for instance, you have individual what's the word? Phased nodes. So like you would get everybody has their own nodes. You can't see theirs, they can't see yours. You can only see
Oh,
your own
okay.
nodes.
Oh, that's kind of weird. All
It
right.
works for Final Fantasy XIV, but it would not work at all for EverQuest Next because
Yeah,
it's two
no, it
different types
wouldn't.
of games. And
Right.
I think people shouldn't. Once people realize that, we'll be a lot better off on like Reddit and stuff. The fact that Final Fantasy XIV is like exactly like, in many ways, exactly like all the games we've played for the last 10 years, but because it sort of understands that, it works. But EverQuest Next is not going to be like the last, but that doesn't mean that it's any better or worse necessarily. It just means it's a lot different. And certain mechanics that Final Fantasy XIV or World of Warcraft implemented are going to suck if in EverQuest Next, and vice versa. And people should understand that. But that's not the point we're trying to make here. The point is little things that I really liked in games past that don't really change the mechanics of the game at all, but made it really feel a lot more satisfying to play. Like in Final Fantasy XIV, I get to name my mount and put armor on it if I want, things like that. And once you get to level 30, your chocobo will then have the ability to fight with you as well. So you can then make it like a healer chocobo or like a tank chocobo or a DPS chocobo and stuff like that. And then
That is legit.
you open up like your companion screen with your chocobo there, and it has its name, it has its different trees that you've gone down, like the healer tree, defense tree, and the attack tree or whatever. And then it has its little gear slots, so you can go and buy gear and put on it, and have it doesn't affect it statistically. It just makes it look different. Like it makes it look like it has armor on because you just put armor on that shit. And so you pick your Grand Company, which is like this faction basically, but there's no real PvP in the game, so it's just a decision you make that this is my home city basically. Is what you're saying. This Grand Company is my Grand Company, and I'm going to start doing quests for it, earning seals. And then when you get your chocobo, it has the what is that stuff called that like hangs off the side of knights' horses and stuff? Damn it, what's it called?
Uh,
Barding.
okay.
The barding stuff that hangs off like knights' horses has like their colors and emblems and stuff whenever they're jousting or whatever.
Right.
And you get automatically your chocobo has barding on it. That's the colors and the symbols of your grand company. And then you can buy like actual like armor, like heavy armor, plate mail stuff that you go on your chocobo and it looks pretty sweet. Stuff like that. So like if you let me name my mount, I'm instantly gonna be like more in love with the experience that I'm having. If you let me name my armor, that's cool too. If you let me name my house that I just built, in the case of EverQuest Next, if I get to call it Breeze Home or something like that, then that's even better. And when people can like mouse over this stuff and it says this is Breeze Home as my house's name, and if you I don't know, Uber hasn't played it, but it's from Skyrim, and then that's cool. And one more thing from Final Fantasy 14 before I turn it over to Uber and let him talk about it is ambient noises. Okay, so and I'm talking about dynamic ambient noises where the murmur that you sort of hear when you enter a tavern is louder or quieter based on how many actual players are in the room. It's badass. It's like a simple thing that is so cool to me. I don't, and I'm sure nobody else gives a shit about it, but to me, I'm just mind blown by the fact that I walk into the tavern at peak time and it's just loud as hell. But if I walk in at like midnight when nobody's in there, it's not. And I'm not talking about like NPCs either. I'm talking about how many players are actually congregated in the tavern or in the little quest hub or whatever the case is. To me, that's really cool. And it's that. And I'm not saying that this should be implemented in a game. I'm saying that it's my point is, and I think I proved it, is that those little things that don't really matter, they don't actually affect your gameplay necessarily. They affect your experience, and I think that is just as important early on. Maybe not after you've been playing for a year. You're not going to care how loud the tavern is after a year, but at first, it can be like, how fast do I get addicted to the game? Well, because this tavern's really loud right now, maybe I want to play a little bit more and stuff like that. And I think maybe that is. I've always wondered what makes the MMO addictive because it seems like I play the same one every single time I open a game, but some of them I don't get addicted to. I get bored with them, and some of them I do get massively addicted to. So maybe those little things are actually the key. And now, what do you think?
Well, uh, I was kind of thinking while you were talking, although I was listening at the same time. But I think you totally nailed it when you said it's not necessarily these things affect the gameplay, but they affect your experience. And that makes all the difference, right? Because like for example, like fishing in World of Warcraft, it was something that people could do while they were just sitting around, right? So even when they were waiting, they had something to do. And I think that's what they try to do in Star Wars: The Old Republic was give you crafting, which is what you were supposed to do while you were sitting around, even though the downside to that was there really was nothing epic about crafting, which there should be, because crafting should be an experience, especially if that is like if you want to make crafting important, but that's a whole nother debate. Um, I can't necessarily pinpoint the things that like make or break a game, but I can tell you the things that like totally destroyed the game for me. Like, damn, what was something that really like pisses me off? This like battle music, right? I mean, like, some people could argue like, okay, battle music is like it fades in and it as your actions get more intense, the music gets more intense, but it's like there's nothing that could take me more out of the experience than battle music, because what that means is all of a sudden I'm walking around and a string quartet comes over and just starts like hammering on the strings because like things are getting intense, and it's like, wait a minute, like all of a sudden just like the game changes. Does that make any sense what the hell I'm saying, or do you not get that?
I get it, and I guess to me it's more important to know it like you learn to like know if you're being attacked because the music gets
Because of the
intense.
music, right? But doesn't that take you out of it in a way,
Yeah, like
because
that's what I
now
mean is
you're
like if you're gonna make the music intense, then do it better, I guess.
the music should get intense because you all of a sudden you fell off of a bridge crumbled from underneath your feet. The music should get more intense because the enemy took out like a weapon they were like hiding under their cloak. The music should not get intense because a mob aggroed.
Right? Well, like the thing is, like you fight so much in MMOs, any game. That's the whole point usually. So you fight so much that it's almost to the point where there's no point in having a difference between fighting music and normal music. So you might as well just. I know there was a game. Maybe it was Neverwinter, but it felt like a certain zone. Yeah, it was Neverwinter. It was like the second or third zone you enter. It was the an orc invasion had taken over part of the city, and the music for that zone was combat music. It was on all the time, and I wanted to kill myself because of it. And so I ended up turning the music off. And granted, I usually end up turning the music in every game off at some point. But there's always that moment in the beginning of it where you're like, this is pretty good. Um, so, I mean, Elder Scrolls Online has really good music. I'm not allowed to say that, but it does. It has pretty good music, and so I left it on and listened to it. And but eventually you're gonna turn it off. So it is little things like that. So
Or like another thing I was gonna say is like the capital city for Star Wars: The Old Republic wasn't really a capital city. It was a ship that
mhm.
was ugly as sin. I mean, like in DCUO, like the cool thing is you kind of had a starting area, but like the quote unquote capital city was the what was it even? Was
I
it
can't
the
remember. It was the Hall of Justice, wasn't it?
something like that, right?
Yeah.
It was still kind of cool. Like even though it was all a spaceship, like it was still kind of cool, you know. But like
It made sense too in this terms of a story because as a hero, you're not all gonna start in New York or
right,
whatever.
but don't make the place everyone is gonna spend 80% of their time a giant brown donut. For God's sake. It was so infuriating. It was like you made all of these beautiful settings, you know, for people to go play in, but the majority of the time, I mean, okay, but on the flip side, you have a place like, I mean, you have like Guild Wars 2. It was just the city was too big. There
Mhm.
was too many zones. You don't want a zone like ever in your capital city because again, you're distancing, like you're creating barriers
Right.
between interaction. It's the same. I felt the same way with Neverwinter. It wasn't necessarily there was. I mean, I don't know if there were zones per se, but it just didn't feel good. Like and that's one thing about World of Warcraft. It was like I can still kind of recall all the different areas in the game, like for the capital cities and stuff. It was just the layout was just so key. Like you say what you want about the gameplay, but it was just like there was a huge bridge leading into Stormwind, and there
Mhm.
was a the giant statues. I mean, maybe it was so simplistic that you could actually like put it to memory, and so it wasn't that it was necessarily more epic than what's come out since, but it just like uh like I really like the original Guild Wars cities too, like because they were handcrafted, right? Like I think that's something obviously we're gonna have to let go with EverQuest, but um, and just the kind of the sense that you could walk into a place and it just feels perfect. I
Right.
don't know. That's
Well,
something I
like
really
somebody was
like in a
talking about
game.
on a thread or something about if you go into Ironforge, which I don't know if you ever went there, it was the dwarf capital city in World of Warcraft, and it felt great whenever you're near. Well, first of all, it was designed fairly well. I mean, it was easy. You know where everything was basically because it was in the same sort of situation as in Stormwind, where you had different areas and they were segregated based on what was in the area. Like if it was the priest, it was like the church and stuff for the paladins versus like the magic area, which is for the mages and warlocks and stuff, etc. But they were talking about how it felt really great whenever you're near like the popular parts of the city, but like whenever you go to the other parts and you look in these little houses that these dwarves are supposed to be living, they look sort of bare, and nobody ever goes to them, and that's exacerbated by whenever you put actual legitimate reasons that you don't go in areas, a big door that you have to load screen through, and you don't see the people through there, because you can't, because it's an instance. And I think whenever World of Warcraft was in its middle of its prime, and there wasn't a new 3 new MMOs coming out every year like there is now, um, there was this argument like World of Warcraft's better because there's no instances, like everything is open world. But now it's sort of like, well, you either have it or you don't, but nobody's really talking about it too much. It's not like a there's not like a big huge selling point anymore because you either have instanced areas or you don't, and people just deal with it either way. But at one point it was a big deal, but now I do think it actually qualifies as one of the little things because it's not such a big deal. You just sort of deal with it, but it can actually affect, quote unquote, again, your experience more so than the actual gameplay because I don't really think it does the matter to the gameplay too much, but to the experience certainly. Like it definitely segregates things. And one of the topics I was thinking about going over in this episode was how to make players visit areas that they've already gone through so that it makes the world feel more equally filled up, so you don't just go to a zone when you're tier 1, you go back to it when you're tiered up all the way. How can you make that happen where there's a bunch of players in and out of areas all the time, so no area feels barren because it's in the middle? There's always people in the starter zone because people are alcoholics, but and there are always people in the end zone because that's where all the gameplay is. But when you're in the
Right.
middle areas, it's always you by yourself because you're the only level 50 in the game, pretty much, instead of being at level 80 or whatever, or
Hmm.
1 or 10. So the idea, and that sort of goes back to the little things. Like it's really hard to do that if you put actual barriers like load doors and stuff like that in between, especially in a city like in Guild Wars where there was 3 or 4 different places in
Yeah,
the
could you?
city.
I really couldn't believe it. Like, it was kind of cool because it was so big, but at the same time, it's like, really, I'm zoning in the city, you
Yeah, and I
know?
think, but also that's like a mindset too. Is like maybe they're sort of treating the city like it was in a leveling zone, sort of. But at the same time, people expect that to be this epicenter of the social part of the game.
And that too, the fact that you would, let's say you're in a group with your friends, and then you go through the door, and you're no longer in the same instance of of the next
Right.
zone. It's like head against the wall,
And
you know? Like,
that's why I didn't really. That's one of the things that I didn't like about Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2 and any other game that has like the mega server where you're just separated by different instances of the same area. I hate that. And it's the same thing to me as having multiple guilds. Like you're making. I think having a server segregated like that is just a larger idea of a guild. Like that's your server. The people that play on the server are part of your social economy or ecology. And by making it so there's 150,000 people playing your game if your game is shitty, because that's about the number that MMOs sort of settled for nowadays. 150,000 people on the same server, but it's still hard to like play with them. Why don't you just so it's not only is it hard to like make like a click with that many people playing, but also it's hard to actually play with your click because of the systems in place.
yeah.
So why not go? There are certain, like I said last episode, there are certain things in World of Warcraft that should not go into the new games because World of Warcraft has evolved into this beast that it needs certain tools because of its age and its size, I guess. But in a new MMO, no matter what kind of MMO it is, if it's EverQuest Next new sort of revolutionizing the industry type MMO, or if it's Final Fantasy 14 where it's sort of doing the same thing again, doesn't matter. Is you have certain things you need to put in and certain things you need to leave out when you're trying to pick pieces off of the a cookie cutter of WoW. And I don't. What am I trying to say? um, and I don't think that having a mega server and avoiding the World of Warcraft 100 different servers with about 2,000 or so people on each one is the way to go. I think that's a really good system that builds community, and there's a reason why, whenever I play WoW, I have a guild of people I know versus when I play certain other games, I don't. I never do. Like I can play
Yeah.
World of Warcraft
Yeah.
by myself without my built-in real life friends that I played with everything with. I can go play World of Warcraft and immediately I can find locate a group of people I want to play with and join their guild and play with them and do the things because every part of the environment is sort of built around that idea. there's servers, segregated servers. There's one guild per person, or yeah, per person. That all works. This other stuff, I don't really think does. To me, it doesn't. I think there are
It works for a different
games.
kind of gamer, maybe, but not for us.
Well, I think there's a games that could have worked. Like I think Shadowbane could have been great like that, sort of. Um, but for the games that are like built around guilds and smaller groups of people playing together, which I think most are because, or I think most should be because I think that's the everybody's demographic. You're looking to concentrate on a bunch of different demographics of people so that you can have all those demographics in your game paying your subscription fees or whatever, so you can make more money. But at the same time, the one demographic that most people are already a part of is they already have a small group of friends they're going to play with. So why not like focus on that instead of focusing on making them play with strangers all the time?
Well, isn't that what Star Wars: The Old Republic tried to do with their flashpoints? Is create it so that a small group of four people could play something together?
Yeah, but at the same time they had instance versions of every zone that you had to like figure out what number, version of Tatooine you were on so you could all play together. And it was a lot better than Guild Wars 2 was, but it was still there. So
What
I
was
mean,
weird it was that it was hard to tell like which instance you were on. Like
right.
I remember it was like kind of tricky for us to actually all get in the same zone when we first tried like
Yeah, it was kind of
doing
hidden on
that.
the map and stuff, and I guess Guild Wars 2 sort of made it more apparent, but it was also even harder because there was like 20 versions of one zone instead of just three or
Yeah.
four because it was based on the entire population of the game, not the entire
We
population of
actually
just
had
the
a queue
server.
to get into
The
the instance you wanted.
Yeah,
Like
it was pretty bad. It was pretty
and then when
bad,
you
and
zoned, you got kicked out of that like instance.
yeah, it wouldn't. Whenever I'm sure
Uh,
they've that was one of the hopefully that was one of the first things they fixed was the fact that your group actually entered the same zone if you went in as a group or something, or if your group mate was in this area, you went into the area, it would automatically select the zone that they were in, the instance they were in. But it wouldn't, it wouldn't. It would send you to like number 20 instead of number 15 where your friend was or whatever.
I feel like it was so funny because Guild Wars is called Guild Wars, but yet I felt like I played that game via like mailing it in, like I interacted with a guild via mail more than I interacted with them in person. I think that's
No.
a fundamental problem. I mean, that's a really big problem when it's like you know how like people will say, oh, people who spend all their time online aren't really actually interacting with people. It was like that's the way the game was. You weren't really even interacting. It was like a step away and then a step away. Like you were so far removed from actually playing with people, even though you were like running around and jumping into battles with random people. That was the problem. Everything in that game was so random. It was too random.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm thinking all it goes back to multi guilds. I fucking hate
Yeah,
that. I really just
yeah.
hate it. I don't think any. I think you can say there's certain people that it works for, but it's like 5 people in the world that works for. I feel like. I
It
feel like
works for
there's 10 million people that
yeah.
never there's 10 million people playing World of Warcraft right now that never complain about not being able to join 10 different guilds. You find the guild you want, and if you don't like it after a while, you join another guild, and maybe that makes
Yeah.
you fickle and a guild hopper. But that is it becomes an actual problem. Like you go from being fickle to being like having an actual social illness once you are able to join 10 different guilds at the same time.
It's like I guess we talk about giving people a choice, and I guess that was just something where they gave people a choice. But then you like to say sometimes people don't know what they want or what they actually need, and I think in this case that's
Yeah, and it's like
the
as
reality.
I keep saying is like by letting you have the option to like meet a million different people through that, you're devaluing every single one of them because
Yeah.
so. The other small topic was consoles because I've been playing, as you know, Final Fantasy 14, and they actually have PS3 version of the game, and you play with those people on the same servers, and it's become an issue because they suck. I'm not saying PS3 players are not as good as PC players. I'm just saying that there's two things happening. Firstly, playing on a controller is it's harder to play traditional MMO content with a controller because you have to target certain boss at a certain time, certain player at a certain time if you're a healer, etc. And it's just the targeting system with the controller is just not adequate enough to handle that. It's not so bad as a DPS because usually it's just a matter of targeting the target and hitting it, and it actually is easier with the controller because you can move around a little bit easier with your controller joysticks and stuff like that. The other problem though is that console players at their core, and I mean a lot of because people who play PC games and have experience in MMOs, they aren't going to pick the PS3 version over the PC version. It's just not what they're going to do. They're going to play the PC version if they have a choice. So you have a bunch of people who haven't played MMOs traditionally, so they don't have the right mindset necessarily. Like I've been playing a tank for a decade. Whenever I jump into a game, it doesn't matter if I played it for 30 minutes. I can basically tank an instance. It doesn't matter. I know that there's threat. I know that I know that I need to keep threat. I need to protect everybody in the group. I know there's a rotation I have to figure out, and usually it's fairly simple to figure out what I need to press at what time and stuff. And then, but the console players haven't had that ingrained in their brain, so there's this really big gap between where you absolutely know that that person's playing on a PS3 because of how inadequate they are to an extent. And I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just saying that that's just how it is. Now, me and you played DC Universe, as we mentioned this episode, actually. And there was a console version of that, but the difference was there was PS3 servers and there was PC servers, so you have both groups segregated. And I don't think it mattered too much because it was all PvP, so it didn't matter about the mechanics of the game necessarily. Like if you had this game, for instance, and it was all segregated, it would be so hard to like get a raid done because everybody was like handicapped by this controller. Whereas in DCUO, you're just playing against other people, so everybody had the same handicap. Sort of
Yeah,
like playing golf, in tiers of
yeah,
shitty
yeah.
people against shitty people. And so I know, and I know they've said in EverQuest Next that they're not even looking at the consoles yet. They want to build a good game, and then they'll look at the consoles once they have a game that they think is really good, which is
Geez,
a good.
I don't really see how they could like develop a game for PC and then as an afterthought develop a console after the fact. Like,
Well, I think that's what a lot of people do nowadays is the problem, and that's why we see really bad ports.
well, I mean, that was the problem for me with the first BioShock game. I mean, story or gameplay or anything aside, the fact is the PC version of the game was a port.
Yeah.
And like coming off of System Shock 2 and whatever, I was just like, what? Like, here I am. I've been waiting for this game forever, and I'm playing a port. I was like, man, this feels so console-y. Like, I really hated it because it was like I felt like I was playing a console game. And it was just like this weird, gross feeling in my mouth. And I'm someone who's played N64 and Xbox and 360 and all this, but it was just like I just felt dirty playing the game on the PC, and I don't want to be like looking at someone and going like, "Wow, I know this." Like let's say I was playing on PC and you were on the whatever console playing EverQuest, and being like, "Wow, I really know that Esh knows how to play, but man, he sucks." Like that just makes it not fun for everyone. I feel.
Yeah.
Give Yeah.
And I guess 'cause it's also funny because you can sort of tell because they take a really, really long time to like type stuff out. So you'll like get an argument. You're like, you have to target this person in this fight, or we're gonna fucking die every time. You have to do this, and then he just like he just stands behind you guys for like 5 minutes, controller typing all this stuff out that he's like, it's like not his fault, and I'm like, dude, You're just proving that it is your fault by this.
Right.
So it's like,
Well, he's proving that there's a game design flaw, and that's my
yeah,
whole
exactly.
point. It was that, like,
And I
even when
think,
you develop a game at the same time for console and PC, it doesn't always work. So how would they be able to develop it after the fact?
yeah, and I mean, to that same point though, it's like there's such a fundamental difference between console and computer that there's no point in trying. It's you know what I mean? Like a shooter is like the closest thing you're going to be able to get to one another, and there's still going to be that gap between the two because they just
Totally
one
different.
they work different, and you have to if you're going to build a game, you have to decide I want this game. I mean, to an extent, any console game you have, you can port it over onto PC. It's going to work. Eventually, it's going to work somewhat, but like if you the problem that a lot of games had early on when consoles were first coming and having a resurgence was that PC it was built for the PC, but it just didn't work on the it didn't take into consideration the handicap of the controller. So whenever you ported it over to consoles, it just didn't work and it wasn't as fun. And but now that the consoles are bigger than the PC now, then you have all these games being ported over, and it just proves that there's a fundamental difference between the two. That the most easily ported genre is still problematic for it. So when you look at and single player games are easier because there's not that comparison
Oh
between the
God, what
two.
was I playing like Dark Soul on the computer without a controller?
Yeah, it's
I stopped after 2 minutes. Well, that's not true. I tried for about an hour trying to figure out the damn controls. It was like this cannot be done with. I mean, okay, it can be done, and I'm sure there's videos of people like playing Dark Souls with a keyboard, but you might as well just stab yourself.
well, like
Like,
in Final Fantasy 14, I played with a controller on my PC.
oh yeah,
Like whenever I first started playing, I had a Lancer, which is a DPS, and it was a lot more fun actually to just
oh
have
okay,
because you just have it right in your hands. Everything's at your hands, and they actually have some innovative ideas on how to work your hotbars with the triggers and stuff. Sort of using them as
okay.
toggles. So whenever you're
Mm-hmm.
toggle down one trigger, then part of your hotbar is active. And you combine your trigger with an A or B or X or whatever to activate those, and then your other trigger toggles the other parts of the hotbar, so you can have 16 buttons available to you that are fairly easy to use. But the targeting system is so bad that it's almost impossible if you're a tank or a healer to target the thing you need to target and do it consistently because it's so impossible. And I can think of various ways that you can improve it, but you have to do it perfectly for it to even be semi-adequate is the problem. And nobody's going to do most things perfectly, so you're always going to have the pothole that you've forgotten about or whatever the case is. So I think there's maybe room for it, but I don't think that you're ever going to get it to the point where they're even. The two things are even enough to
No.
actually have people playing together and it work.
Well, I mean, even if they play together, I mean, not what's the point? Because obviously the point is to get more people and more money, but I just don't, I just don't necessarily know if that's the answer. Maybe it is, but I just don't see that that is like that's where they should put development time and money into to get more people to play. They should just make a better game, not necessarily make it so that console players people can play it. Because
Right.
if it's flawed, I mean, people are gonna say, "Oh, this shit is broken. Like, I'm not gonna play it." You
Well,
know.
the thing
So,
is, like, you could just, as a developer, if you're willing to spend a lot more money on your game, you could just include a keyboard and a mouse in your game that works on Xbox or
yeah,
whatever. And there are
that's
already,
yeah,
obviously keyboards that you can hook up to it. So,
right. I
but
mean, but at that point, you might as well play it on. I mean,
yeah, it's true.
the benefit is if you already have the system, you don't have to worry about um, compatibility, and that's always good. Is to be like, okay, this game was designed for this console. It's not going to be as many bugs, and it's going to play smoothly because it's been optimized, and you know, there's hopefully a greater chance for things like running smoothly, as long as the game's been designed to run to be played on a console.
Right. And like the biggest selling point for consoles versus computers, where you're like, which one's better? Well, obviously computers are more powerful. You're going to get better graphics. People are going to be, the developers are going to be able to push the envelope a little bit more, and it's argued that consoles are the reason that we haven't gone even further in games or in terms of developers, because people they have to develop to these
Right. It
ancient
holds them
ancient
back. Yeah.
hardware, yeah. And but the biggest selling point is that developers can develop for one set of hardware, obviously, and
Yeah.
also everybody has a console because it's only like $300 or $400 versus $1,000 for your PCs. So it's like it's a give and take for sure. I mean, I love my PC. I put a lot of money into it, but I've also got the consoles, and I sort of see the merit of having them. I mean, I'm as excited as anybody else about the PS4, about having one, and that's coming from someone who sees graphics 2 or 3 years ago that look better than the PS4 graphics right now are, in the commercials and stuff. So I'm not impressed necessarily with the graphics I'm seeing, whereas console players are. But I still see the merit, and I'm still excited about the idea of what it means for the industry and stuff like that. And I
Yeah, I
think,
mean, this kind of goes back to our earlier discussion about experience, right? It's a different experience, and there's things that you can experience on a console that are just completely different.
right.
I mean, one of my favorite games is Final Fantasy VII, and I played it as a port on the PC. I mean, I was like trying to figure out, oh crap, which button is bound for like triangle and square, like what select, there's no select on my keyboard, but like still, it's one of my favorite games, and I played it as a port. So I mean, that just goes to show you that like just because it's a console game doesn't mean it's inferior by any means. I'm not saying that, but
Right.
it's a different experience, and I'm sure I would have enjoyed playing it on. Well, actually, no. I mean, the graphics were better. See, and then it goes back to that, right? I played the port of the game, but the graphics were better because it made use of like the Voodoo engine or something on one of the Voodoo cards, and
Mm.
like so the graphics were better than on the PlayStation. So I was like, oh, it looks so good. But
And
anyway,
now it looks like shit regardless.
yeah, exactly. There you go.
But yeah. So there, I think the point we've gotten to is that we both agree that there's such a fundamental difference between the two that it almost is it doesn't work in terms of a persistent world like an MMO to have it do both, really. Other than like DCUO, which I think was perfect for that. Because it doesn't matter if you're on a PC or a controller, you're still going to have. It's going to be an even playing field because the game design isn't really. Maybe it is, and maybe even it is a little bit better on console because it's a more like an arcade slasher, beat 'em
Yeah.
up kind of
Like
game.
it doesn't work when you have to like point and click somewhere, like it wouldn't I don't see it working for a MOBA style game.
All right.
I see it working for, like you said, like an arcade type game where it's more direction based and like attack based, but not necessarily point and click or, to this destination and then, all the way across the map somewhere and
Right.
like that's not going to work with a controller, I don't think.
No, probably not. I mean, I guess that's it really. um, So yeah, I've been playing Final Fantasy 14, and if you guys are looking for a game that holds you over until something else comes out, that's probably the one you should pick because it looks really good. Like it has really good graphics, and it's fun.
And I've been playing Facebook games because I have no time.
Right. Obviously, I've been playing all the games that like people don't realize is that whenever you start a YouTube channel, the only time you play the games that you record are when you record them. Like playing Minecraft off camera just does not entice me at all. But because I
Right.
play it on camera all the time, so like whenever somebody really popular like Yogscast says that where talks are doing in a game and they don't know how to make something in Minecraft, it's like you guys, this is like you must play way more Minecraft than me. How do you not know how to make a bow or whatever? But they don't. The 30 minutes you were watching is how much they played this week.
Right.
30 minutes. But Final Fantasy 14, that's why I don't record it, because I would want to kill myself,
You want to keep
basically.
it fun, right? You want to keep it as kind of like your retreat away from all of responsibility.
Yeah, and it's like when I'm playing Minecraft Hexit, the only time I play Minecraft now is when I either record it or when I want to build the city up. Like, it has
Right.
nothing to do with the gameplay or anything. I just want to, like, make the city a little bit prettier. That has, I mean, one of my favorite things that I've done in like the past month is make the village city look better by putting fences around it and stuff.
Is
Pretty
this
much it.
Nachoville or something?
Yeah, Nachoville. I like added another tier to it
Oh,
yesterday,
nice.
so it's got another tier of the village, and there's like 30 villagers in there now. It's getting crazy, and like people are just having sex in the streets, and like little baby villagers are popping out. It's nuts. It's crazy. But I have like a waterfall now and stuff. It's awesome. But anyway, that's
This
nothing
sounds
to do with any of the
nuts.
topics.
This is nuts.
Okay, so that's all we got. Unless you got anything to add to either of the things topics.
Maybe I will next week.
Okay. Next week we'll have a little bit more planned out. Things were a little bit segmented this week's episode, so I didn't actually get to come up with the topics until right before the show. So if you guys actually want to suggest any topics, then please leave the comments below with the video, or on our website, or on our Twitter, and we'll think about putting them on the official topics list. Until next time, this has been Bonus Round on Questline. I'm Ash, this is Uber. Follow the Questline.